Through our journey and through the documentary of Mallory's Army, what I really wanted to do was continue this voice and continue to showcase other people's stories. Because I think that one of the biggest obstacles that we have is that people feel sorry for you for a few months. You know, they feel sorry, but then they expect you to move on, and what they don't understand is that you never move on. So I wanted to use my life to showcase other people's stories and the things that happen to them, but also what they're doing. They're taking on challenges that I didn't know needed to be taken on, and now that I'm living it, I go, oh, now I can get it. So thank you for being here today and sharing your story. So tell me a little bit about Heartworks and how it came to be after 9/11.
Sure. So the gist of Heartworks is it's a foundation based in Basking Ridge, New Jersey. And my brother-in-law, my sister's husband, was killed on 9/11. His name is John. They had 4 children, 4 young children. When he left for work that day, he was 41. And Marianne and John had dated since I was 7. So John was really a part of my family. I have very few memories without John being involved in them. And when John was killed on 9/11, I lived at my sister's house for 6 weeks after the attacks. And what I can say is the world showed up for her.
Yeah.
From the minute we opened our eyes in the morning until the minute we went back to sleep. And when things started to slow down in terms of I needed to go back to Colorado and get back to work, and things started to adjust to more everyday life, I had just witnessed such a tsunami of love in this aftermath of 9/11. And I thought to myself, why would we ever go back to the way that it was? I wanted to get away from the trauma as much as anybody else did, but the eye contact, the hugs. I'm a person that is pretty comfortable.
Everybody talks about September 11th, but what they really remember is September 12th and 13th. Those were the days I said, if we could live in that America every single day, you know, with the American flags. And those were, you would go to the grocery store, and I remember everybody who lived in this area has that same story of what they remember. But it was, you had the cashier asking, is your family okay? And that was pretty powerful.
And what Heartworks is mostly from just the glimpse of Heartworks, we're an acts of kindness group that gives to people during their first 14 months of grief and illness.
Wow.
But what we
14 months.
14 months.
Is the 14 significant?
It's significant in the way that getting people through those first holidays, which can be so paralyzing, and all of those in-between days. And then we didn't want to, because the anniversary of a death can be traumatizing in and of itself, we didn't want to cut it off at 12 months. We wanted to expand it a bit past that.
My name is Mandy Zucker. I'm the program director here at Imagine, a center for coping with loss. So Imagine is a free year-round grief support center. So we provide grief support for families after someone's been diagnosed with an illness and after someone's died. So we start at age 3 and we go up through 18. And then we have groups for young adults as well as for their caregivers. So it's ongoing groups, meaning that you can come for as long as you feel like you need the support. We also do a lot of education out in the community, providing education to basically anybody that will listen to us about how to support grieving kids. When you lose someone in such a public way, the grief is definitely different. I don't even know if I could say it's better or worse. I think that there are some blessings in that as well as some real challenges. So, you know, on an anniversary, when somebody dies, you get to choose how you're going to memorialize if you want to. You might just want to go to work and forget that day and not let it be a special day. 9/11 is a national holiday. There's no way of getting around that. Everybody knows. So, you know, I know people who will say to me, nobody remembered that it was the anniversary of their death. And sometimes that's hard, and sometimes they're kind of glad about that. And on 9/11, no one forgets. So everybody's calling. There's, you know, millions of postings on Facebook with either video or, you know, still pictures. Everybody's, you know, reaching out to you, which may be great and may not be great. you might want to take a vacation that day. And some people might think that that's not an appropriate thing to do. So there's a lot of judgment when somebody dies. When people grieve, people judge you, which is unfortunate, but that's the reality. And when it's such a public loss, people are very quick to judge. And you probably judge yourself. So, I want to do this, but I'm worried what people are going to think. So I'm going to go ahead and, go to the memorial or do whatever other people are doing on that day. So that makes it hard.
9/11 offered my family an opportunity that the outside matched our insides. Insides, we were afraid and we were closing down and we were terrified. And that was reflected in the culture. That one of the unique things about 9/11 is that everybody was on their knees at the same time. And I often say that that's one of the only differences that happened at 9/11, was that we were all brought to our knees at the same time, but people every day are experiencing that same pit in their stomach, that same sense of fear and dread when they get the phone call or the news that somebody they love has died. And I would say that we were in a very unique position because whereas we were looking to be comforted after 9/11, everyone was looking to be comforted. And if you lost someone on that day, if you lost a family member or a friend, you were open to receiving. And if you didn't know someone personally, you were open to giving. So it was this real cosmic mesh and beautiful dance of giving and receiving and the ways that that helps everyone involved. Do I think that John's remains being found brought closure? Yes. I would say a year into it, it made it felt even more witnessed. And when I think about the people that did that painstaking work of identifying the remains, that's one of the things I have in my head, that I would like to meet those people one day, because that's amazing what they were able to do and how many different families, thousands of families that they were able to contact to say, we found something. It makes the invisible more visible. Like, we knew this had happened. We had lived with it for a year, but it was some kind of a confirmation. And I would say that it brought closure because it was one less thing my sister had to think about. I think that it helped also with the fact that it was coinciding with the year anniversary, so that on the year anniversary, we buried John's remains. I don't think it made anything worse because everybody was already immersed in it. So it actually probably combined two things that it might have made it even a little easier, because we were going to be sad anyway. Everybody was going to be re-traumatized anyway with the 1 year anniversary. So this allowed us to kind of grieve two things at once. My father died 4 years after 9/11, and I was very, very close to him. My dad was just this super intense, really loving energy. The morning that he died, I came back to my childhood home. He's on the floor next to the bed, and I'm talking to him, and I'm like, Dad, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do this. Get up, get up, get up, talk to me, talk to me, talk to me. And I could go through the rest of my life attempting to block that experience out. But if I do that, I'm not serving anyone, and we can never block things out to the level that we wish we could.
I read something where someone posted and said, I wish my brain would not communicate with my eyes.
Yeah.
I wish my eyes would not tell my brain what I just saw. Yeah. And I was like, that's pretty powerful when it comes to grief, because that's exactly it, is that your eyes will see it, and there's no way you can unsee it. Right. And then there's a message that goes instantly to the brain, and your brain puts it into a bucket and saves it and keeps it. And then, so it is such an unhealthy, but you're right, you can't unsee that.
You can't unsee it, and the only, and I didn't come up with this concept. I mean, Viktor Frankl wrote about his experience in the Holocaust, and then talks about logotherapy, which is finding purpose in all of your struggle and then using that to serve the world. And that's really the gist of everything, that every hard thing that I've been through, whether it's been depression or grief or anxiety, I use it to sit with another human being and understand more where they're coming from out of the perception of my own life. And that's what I want women in particular, people in general, to be doing more, is stop thinking that your story is so different than everybody else's, because we're all human beings. We are in an impossible situation of the expectation of love with all of your heart,
right?
Everything that is impermanent.
In a family system, when one person dies, there's individuals and then there's a family. And that's challenging because we all grieve individually. So I'm extroverted. I like to talk about my feelings. I like to be with other people. My sister's an introvert and is going to want to probably go to her room and be alone. And I'm going to feel insulted by that because I want to be together. And she's going to feel terribly annoyed by me, who's infringing upon her space. And I think it's really important when you're in a family or a friend group, you know, anybody that you're trying to support when you're all grieving, to be able to talk about what each of you needs. So I need to be with you sometimes. Okay, I'm going to give you some time to be with me, but then I need to be by myself. Can you give that to me as well? And I think that's really important to kind of figure out in a family what each of us needs.
I often share that when I started writing my own kind of like memoirs, and I'm working with someone, and one of the things that I say is that as I was going through it, the person that's helping me ghostwrite the book, she said, oh, you know, I was like that and I had that. And I said, isn't it interesting that we all have very similar stories? Like if we can identify and recognize that we might have had difficult childhoods growing up. I might have really difficult childhood, but I'm often grateful, and that's what I try to explain to children when I'm talking to them, is that I always say to them, bad things happen to good people.
Yeah.
Like bad things do happen to good people. Like as we're sitting here having a conversation, there's a mom sitting in an oncology office right now learning that her child has cancer and she's devastated and she doesn't know where she's gonna go, what she's gonna do, but it's that experience of her surviving that and getting through that. And so I always say that bad things are gonna happen to us, and I think that's an important lesson for us to learn and teach to our children, as I think that as parents, we're often sheltering them from these bad experiences, when the bad experiences will mold them into who they are. How do you become an overcoming individual if you don't have those life experiences?
And if you're not paying attention and honoring what you've been through and how fucking painful it was.
Yeah.
You know, that's the other thing that kind of gets skipped over in this idea of wanting everybody to feel good all the time. It's feel what doesn't feel good, and there is a way that can help you heal, and that is through connection with another human being. That is through, you know, so we have these meetings. Heartworks has these Heartworks meetings every month. You have to come to one. They're once a month.
I'm always scared of them, I'll be honest with you. People,
Okay.
So I'll tell you,
I want to hear that because I hear that all the time. So I want to hear.
I'm scared. I'll tell you, so there's two parts to it. Number one, I'm selfish. I'll be the first one to say I'm selfish. I don't want to share the stage because my heart is broken. So I often feel like that I don't want to sit next to another mom that lost another child because it is so overwhelming. As human beings, we absorb, like as you were describing 9/11, I remembered, I instantly started to relive where I was at,
Yes.
what I did. Just saying the words 9/11, I know where I was at. And so I immediately start to respond emotionally. If another mother or another person was to share their emotional experience, I feel like sometimes like my heart can't take anymore. Like I'm still so grieving Mallory that I just don't know that I can sit and do so. It's almost like I'm selfish. I only want to be the one that's hurting. I want to be the one that's center of attention, not because I need it, just because I just don't know that I can take on.
So that's not being selfish, that's being human.
Yeah, but that's how it
Like
feels.
for reals.
It feels, that's how it truly feels. And I have this, you know, we have these Facebook groups of moms of grieving and things like that. And there's often times that I sit there and I read them and I just go, I just can't. You know, I'll read their posts or I'll read them and I'll go, I just can't. And I have to click out of it because not only does it remind me of my own situation, but it forces me to identify that another human being is hurting, and I feel like sometimes I just can't take it anymore.
And then that's on top of yours.
Right, on top of that. So it's like I'm having enough difficult time managing my own feelings.
How is doing these interviews different for you? Or is it not?
You know, it's so weird because there are two parts of Dianne. There is the public advocacy Dianne that is like, don't mess with me. Like, I deliberately wore my jacket and my ripped up jeans today because I had a mission. You know, I want the Senate and I want the Assembly. Like I always say, these are my fighting pants, right? You know, I'm gonna come to battle. So there is the Dianne that's the one that really wants to make a difference. And then there's the, you know, but then there's the Dianne that sits. Then there's the just Dianne who lost Mallory, you know, that's Mallory's mom.
And wants to be able to live.
Yeah, and I just want to be, you know, I asked about the 14-month because that's exactly what happens. Everybody thinks that the first year, listen, I didn't understand the definition of community until Mallory died. I had strangers leaving plates of food that would never be eaten. I had strangers sending flowers. I have more jewelry and more bracelets and more angel necklaces than I can ever wear, and I love each and every one of them. I sometimes will sit and just stroke them and hold them. I have prayer quilts and prayer cloths. I have a blanket that was hand knitted by a group of women that the needles had to have been this big. And I just, sometimes when I'm feeling sorry for myself, I just wrap myself in that blanket. So I now know the definition of community. So there's that, Dianne. But you're right, at 12 months, as soon as that 1 year hits, people think that it's someone else's turn for them to invest in. And I understand that. Someone else's child has died. Someone else's husband has died. So you've got to share that love and that grief with other people. Yet you're still left shattered. You're still picking up these shards of glass that have cut your hands.
And I think that you're picking up those shards of glass one way or the other.
Yeah.
And it's so funny that you use that example, because one of the things that I always think about with Heartworks is, on some level, the love is just a coating. Mm-hmm. You're going to be picking up those shards of glass.
Yes.
Regardless of whether or not I bring you a lasagna.
Right.
But maybe bringing the lasagna just made something about picking up those shards of glass every day a little more gentler.
Now let me ask you this, because this is a interesting, again, my perspective. Is bringing the lasagna, is that for you or is that for me?
Okay. So what we talk about in Heartworks, and what I talk about with people in my private practice, is we've all been in this situation where we see a post and it's like, we're making the lasagna for the Smith family that had a loss, last month. And then one of the choices is to just blindly say, oh, everybody else on the soccer team is signing up, I'm gonna sign up, okay? Right. That's fine. There's nothing hurtful about that. The lasagna is going to get delivered. The Smith family is going to have the lasagna. It might give the mom, an extra hour to do something else that night than cook. What I try to educate people on doing is sign up for that in honor of the fact that we are all here as human beings. Life is super friggin' hard and unpredictable. This could be you tomorrow, and it's been you in the past to some degree. So come from that place. And we do this whole thing in Heartworks that if you sign up for a meal for someone, do it as consciously as you can, so that when you go to the grocery store, you're being grateful that you have money to buy the ingredients. You're thanking God that you have enough food. Thank God for the electricity in the grocery store. Be kind shopping for those.
Be in the moment.
Be in the moment. Be kind as you're shopping for those ingredients. Have eye contact. If you see somebody you haven't seen in a while, give her a hug. So that you start the process of being conscious. And then when you're going home and you're cooking, pray. Pray into the noodles. If you're not a prayer person, send good vibes into the sauce and into the noodles. And while it's cooking, be grateful for your life. So there's this whole idea of intention while we're giving, and then it all becomes a part of we all become a part of each other's journeys by staying present in our own lives with this understanding that life is unpredictable and can be really hard, and it can happen to any of us at any time.
I love that. I was talking about Carly being a skater, and there was a mom in one of Carly's skating groups who was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I remember this because it's such an important part of my journey and understanding when, and it's exactly what you said. So the family was very organic. They had certain diet restrictions. Yeah. You know, they had rules. They were also Jewish, so they had certain grocery stores, and they were kosher, and all of these things.
Yeah.
There were all of these rules around the meal train, and I remember in that moment being so aggravated.
Sure.
I remember thinking, so I felt like I was bullied into it. I was pressured into, everybody was doing it, right? It was, all the moms were helping this family, and there were so many rules around it. And I remember feeling so obligated, and I remember the emotions feeling that I had to do this. You know, I had to buy the vegetables here, and I had to do this. I didn't think of it from anybody else's perspective except for my own.
Sure.
I regret the message that I sent to my daughters, because I remember being in the grocery store of this store, and I remember bitching and complaining
Sure.
to Carly about, oh my God, this is what I have to do,
Sure.
and I got to make this thing, and it has to be this soup, and what have you. And I look back on that and think, God, what message did you send to your children? Fast forward to my experience. I was down in Atlantic City, testifying in front of the Superintendent's Association. And as I'm in the bathroom washing my hands, I really do believe I probably have the most distinctive voice in New Jersey. People can hear me 3 miles away.
Yeah.
So I'm washing my hands, and my phone had rang, and this woman heard me on the phone, and coming from the stall, she's like, Dianne Grossman. And I looked up and I saw her, and I said, oh my God, hello Jen, how are you? I haven't seen you in forever. I was like, what are you doing here? I'm here at the convention. And so I introduced her to my husband, and I said, and he kind of looked, and I said, oh, I said, Jen's the one that made the quiche. I said, she's the one, it was all the homemade vegetables that she grew with her son. I was like, remember, it was the vegetable quiche, and I was like, and it came from her garden. And as I'm describing in detail the quiche that she made and the dish, she looked at me and she goes, you remembered? And I said, oh yeah. I said, you made that quiche with your boys, and they picked the vegetables, and they did it, and they made it, and it was the homemade. And I just remember those two experiences. Had I gone into the breast cancer understanding their diet restrictions and that they're trying to be holistic about their approaches, had I gone into it different, maybe the experience would have been different.
But you don't know what you don't know.
But I was so proud in that moment, because I saw the reaction on her face, that in that moment, and that's why I asked, is it for you or is it for me? Where is it? Because I often talk about...
I don't think that there is a line. I think that giving and receiving is the same energy.
Yeah.
And it's just, we never use the term in Heartworks, give to a family in need. Mm-hmm. That has always struck me as such a ridiculous concept, because we're all in need.
Good point.
So somebody just says, oh, I'm working for this charity, we give to people in need. I may not be in need of a winter coat, but I may be in deep need of connection.
Right.
I may be in deep need of a compassionate ear.
So as a, sort of an acquaintance or someone who's not in the inner circle, and you want to be supportive to someone, what I always say is what you want to do, there's nothing to do, first of all. The thing that everybody would want you to do is bring the person back. You can't do that. So there's no magic words to say. There's no errand you can run, gift you can buy that's going to make everything better for them, which is what we wish we could do. So since we can't do those things, the best thing that we could do as somebody who's supporting someone else who's grieving is be there. Let them talk to you as much as they want. I frequently think we do for others what we want done for ourselves. So I'm a hugger. When I am sad, I want somebody to give me a hug. So when I see someone sad, the first thing I want to do is give them a hug. But everyone's not a hugger. So I hold back on doing that, despite the fact that I think that's going to not solve their problems, but that's going to make them feel better because that makes me feel better. So I frequently just ask, what would be helpful to you? If there's anything, I would love to give you a hug right now. I don't know if that would be helpful to you or not. I met a woman once who shared that her father used to bring her one banana every day, because she liked to eat bananas for breakfast. And her father would bring her one banana, which means that every day he was coming over. Sometimes she'd invite him in and say, you want a cup of coffee? And she'd talk to him. And other times she'd say, thanks for the banana, and close the door, right? And that was fine, because he was following her lead, letting her know that, if you want to talk to me, I'm here. And if you don't, I'm still here. And I just thought that was such a beautiful gift to her. There's nothing that we can do or say that's going to really make them feel better. But being there, letting them share, letting them talk about their experience without, giving them advice or telling them what to do, is really the only thing that we can do, and frequently makes them feel better.
So after 9/11, one of the wonderful blessings in Marianne's life was a group of therapists got together and formed an organization called Goals, and it was for going on after loss. And what the Goals curriculum was they gathered 9/11 families, and there was a theme each week. So the theme may be resiliency, and how to feel resilient, or how to get through the holidays. What they would do is they would gather all of the families together in a church, and we would talk about, I was one of the therapists on staff that would come in with the crisis relief team and help. And what we would do is we would have a topic. All the families started together, so you had a sense of community, so the kids could look around and say, I'm not the only one that's in this situation. There's a power to that. And then we broke everybody up into age-appropriate groups to go over the theme in more in-depth details, but at age-appropriate levels. And then at the end of the night, everybody joined back together, and we had a social hour for everybody to eat dinner together. So I think that one of the things that the kids learned, and Marianne learned in the Goals program, is that there is a new normal. Nothing will ever be the old normal, but there will, because of the power of grace, because of part of the human experience is being able to develop a new sense of normalcy. That's what I would say has happened. I think the way to get to a new normalcy is through therapy, through support, through kindness, through being open to anything that is kind, that is coming your way, anything that is loving, that is coming your way. There was a lot of kind and loving things coming towards my family after 9/11, and it's one of the things that I say to people in current grief is to just be open to the grace. Be open to the fact that when you open your eyes in the morning, you think you know what your day is going to look like in grief, and you don't. You could be in the grocery store, and a smile from the guy behind the counter shifts things for you. And so I think that when you are in it, the idea of a new normal does not seem enough, because on some level, all you want is your person back. And there is something in the human experience that allows space for joy, that allows space for continued connection, that allows space for new adventures, even though they are not how you thought they were going to be.
But number one, if we're going to reach these kids and we're going to teach kids with an empathetic perspective, then we've got to teach them from early on.
And the early on is saying to a class of kindergartners, everybody in here has things happening in their lives that are really joyful and awesome, and everybody in here is struggling with something.
Yeah.
And if you're not, then your parents are, or your parents' parents are.
I love that. Everybody's in need. I love that. I never thought about it.
And so for me, when I'm up there and there's 80 women sitting in the folding chairs, I always say to women, there is no difference between you and the people on the table, other than you may not be in acute crisis right now.
So
but
powerful.
We're all going to be on the table at one, we call it our sacred table at Heartworks. We are all going to be on the sacred table, or we've been on the sacred table. And my point is, once you've been on that sacred table of receiving, what we think is going to help us is to stuff it and to block it. It never works. I've been a therapist for 25 years. It doesn't work to the degree that we want it to work. I'm not saying do it immediately and do it on your own. I'm saying that the option other than stuffing down that pain is to be open and real about your story. Have a tribe of people around you that no matter where you are on any given day, you can call them without hesitation. Yeah. You need that. Work on that, the feeling, don't do it all at once, and certainly don't do it alone. Right. But read the books of people that have written books based on what you've been through. Sit with other people that are in that experience. Get more practice with being in joyful situations, because that's a whole nother training for you.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother training, to be joyful in Carly's experiences.
Yeah.
To be joyful with your husband, to be joyful on a holiday. And that almost at some point becomes part of the full-time job of grief.
It is.
9/11 has become sort of a model for compassion. So despite the fact that all of these horrible things happened, we now have, a day of service on 9/11. So I do think that it has become, certainly as we've moved away from that actual date, I'm able to now look back and say, wow, all of these wonderful people that took care of one another, and we continue to do that on 9/11. And I think we've been really, the country as a whole has been very conscious of the fact that we don't want it to be just a day, we want to make sure that we're taking good care of our neighbors, that we are being more compassionate. So, doing volunteer work on that day, or, checking in on your neighbors, or just doing acts of kindness have become, really important on that day. And I think that's, a beautiful thing that's never happened with a national tragedy like this before.
I have actually built an entire nonprofit organization based on the idea of staying in that mindset that we had after 9/11. I'm always the one to say it's not about staying in the trauma of it, but it is about staying in the love and the connection of it. That after 9/11, everyone was hugging each other. After 9/11, there was eye contact. After 9/11, we didn't care so much about what type of car we were driving or what party we were invited to. There was a naked connection. There was an untethered understanding of love and support and rawness that if we could all stay in, I think it would improve the quality of our lives. And one of the things that we talk about so often in my foundation is that every day is somebody's 9/11. It might not be on the news, it might not be a historical event, but right now, today, as we're doing this interview, somebody is experiencing a life-altering loss. And what if every single time that someone experienced the fear of a diagnosis or the grief of losing a loved one, what if every single person who had been through that used that in a way of service to the world, used that to shift, moving forward from that day, how they operate with other human beings, in the idea of being more authentic, being more patient, being more kind. Because when people say to me that I'm giving back to the community, it doesn't feel like that. Being able to do things for other people who are grieving was a way for me to move forward. It was a way for me to expand out from this loss instead of contracting in. Because that's a choice after loss, to let it fold back in on you and be in a crumpled pile, or to expand out and become more light on the planet. If there is one thing that every human being alive on this planet is going to experience or has experienced, is loss. And so what if that was the common thread of having been through an experience and using that experience to be in service to other people? What if that was more in the forefront of our culture? And it is a way to heal. It is a way to heal the yearning and the emptiness after a loss, to live as consciously as you can in honor of that trauma that you've been through, and to reach your hand out to another human being who may not be in the same level of trauma. That doesn't matter. Loss is loss and struggle is struggle. So whether it's that you're struggling with grief or addiction or depression or a divorce or broken family systems, loss is loss, fear is fear, grief is grief. And what if we started reaching out from that point rather than wanting to shut it down and not wanting other people to know that we're struggling? Everybody's struggling. Everybody is struggling with something. Terrorism and acts of hate have been happening since literally the beginning of mankind.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
And so for me, it was this really unique situation of living in the United States, this not being a part of my family's storyline. Well, guess what? When I was 17 and I was walking through the hallways of my high school, terrorism was happening all over the place.
Right.
Terrorism has been happening all over the world to some degree since the beginning of time.
Right.
It's just that it happened to become a part of my personal story that it got my attention.
Right.
And the only difference for me, between 9/11 and anybody's personal loss and struggle is that we were a historical event.
Right.
Everyone was on their knees at the same time with 9/11.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get so caught up in the global story of things that I say do that when it's not a storyline.
Right.
You know, go over and talk to somebody even though it's not on Facebook.
Right.
Because we're missing the intimacy. And I saw one of the things which is so interesting about 9/11 was that people were working through their own resolved grief through the story of 9/11. So people, when a big story happens and there's a lot of focus on it, it gives people the opportunity to work through their own grief through someone else's story, and that's not always the best. So
It's
the difference
so
would,
true.
so the difference would be when I'm
See, I
watching
often-
a movie.
Yes. I
And
hear
I'm
this.
watching a sad thing happen in a movie. I'm crying. But
Right.
of course, I'm not just crying because these fake people
No.
in the movie are upset.
Correct.
It's reminding me of my other losses and the
Right.
things that I struggle with in my life. So what happens now with Facebook and with the internet, that we can be so connected to stories so instantaneously, is that I think that people tend to get swept up in the stories. And what I really want people working on is their own issues with grief, their own issues with how vulnerable and unpredictable life is.
It's so funny that you say that because, you know, before all of this, I have 4 children. I have a 29-year-old, a 27-year-old. I have Carly, who just turned 17, and Mallory would be 14. And so before all of this, like even living it, I knew that bullying, like you said, has been here since the beginning of time. And when people talk to me about bullying or they talk to me about my platform, I always say to them, we're never going to get rid of bullying. What I would like for us to do is be more conscious of our behavior. Even when I go into the schools and I talk to them, I don't talk about bullying. I talk about your behavior. And I tell them your behavior is your superpower. Your behavior has the ability to make someone else have a great day or maybe someone else have a bad day. So rather than, I tell people to put verbs in your sentences. What are you doing today to make sure that someone else has a better day? And in return, you will have an amazing day. But it's funny, bullying was not part of my conversation. Even though I knew that Mallory was being bullied at school and I knew that she was having issues, I felt like that it was just almost like a rite of passage. Like she'll get through this. And because my other children survived middle school, because I think that our children survive middle school. I don't think that they thrive in it. I think that that's a whole other conversation that we should be addressing. With all of the millions of dollars we spend in public education, our children should be having a much better experience in school than they really are. But again, another conversation. But it's funny that you say that. You didn't know that it evolved. And now that I'm living in this world, I've got it. You're right. There's a lot of Me Too's. And parents are starting to identify their own child's issues through Mallory's experience. So they can go, my daughter is like, I actually worked with a therapist who told me that she has children come to her and say, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I'm like Mallory. So there's this whole syndrome that people are referring to as like Mallory that's in all of this. And really how this comes to play, I really don't know, but I guess I just know what you're saying when you say I didn't live in that world, I didn't understand it. And I would like for people to understand about the experience. Like, we shouldn't have to suffer the tragedy in order to have the same empathetic behaviors around it.
Well, and I think one of a gutsy thing to do and a brave thing to do that a lot of people don't know to do is, instead of being focused on even the storyline, how are things in your home today with your children?
You mean take your own temperature?
Take your own temperature.
Grief is a normal, natural response to loss. There's nothing wrong with you for grieving. In fact, you're supposed to. Grief is just feelings. It's just what you feel when you lose something that you care about. Most relationships end unfinished. There are very few relationships where everything's been said by the time the person dies. You know, that's a rare gift when you know someone's going to die and you get to say everything that you want to say before they go. And that you both felt the same way about each other and there's no issues to resolve. That's very rare. Most people die with complications. You know, we're human beings and we're all complicated, which makes our relationships complicated and makes our grief complicated. It is complicated. So, no, I don't think that there is a sort of a formula to tie everything up neatly after someone's gone. For me, I think, you know, I think about the people in my own life that have died, and were there things I wish I had done differently or could have said or shouldn't have said? Of course. I feel comforted knowing that despite the lack of a perfect relationship with anybody that I know that's died or anybody that I know that's alive, most people know that I love them and I know that they loved me. So that brings me a lot of comfort. You know, when somebody dies and you're in a big fight, that's hard because, you know, you think that they died knowing that you were mad at them. You know, there's no one moment in any of our relationships that's defining. When you look back on any relationship that you've had, you look back on the totality of that relationship, not on one moment.
What I try so often to help people with is, you sat there watching somebody die or watching an accident or whatever that was for you. It's over. Allow it to be over so that you get to still live your life. For the person who died, those moments are over. And the only person who can make it over for you is you. And making that choice to come to some level of resolve with that experience and allowing yourself to have new life. And I always think about that if I died in a traumatic circumstances that my girls witnessed, I would never want that to be my whole storyline. I would want them thinking about the birthday parties and me waking them up in the morning and making them hot chocolate when they came in from the snow. I would never, ever want my girls to remember me in those last moments of suffering. So that's part of the healing, is to give yourself permission to let go of that traumatic piece and live in the love of that person and the lessons of that person's life for the rest of your life. That's how you keep the memory alive. That's how that cycle of love continues. So the reason why people were so giving after 9/11 was because they were viscerally feeling this loss.
Right.
And so it helped them to give, and the people that they were giving to were so wiped out that they had no choice. I mean, my sister had no defense. My sister didn't even have the energy to say no.
Right.
And so that was this invisible beauty that was happening, that happens every time there's a tragedy. My point with Heartworks is let's just live this way.
All the time.
All the time without the tragedy. And the way to do that is someone says, well, I don't know what that feels like because I didn't lose somebody at 9/11. But what's your life story?
Right.
And for some people, it's their parents getting a divorce, or for some people, it's a diagnosis. Whatever that was, stay away from the details of the story and what did it feel like, and then connect from that place with another human being.
Yeah. So true. I always tell people when they're like, well, my story's not as people say to me, my story's not as, like yours, I didn't lose a child. And I would say to them, I don't own grief. My story is my story. There was when people ask me oftentimes, like, how are you able to do these things and what have you? And right after Mallory died, I was watching one of these like mindless television shows, and it was kind of like the diseases inside of us or something like this. And there was a woman, they were interviewing her, and she had this genetic disorder, and she married someone with the same exact genetic disorder. And of course, then neither one of them knew that. But the funny thing is in all of this was that they had 4 children. 3 of those children, you saw this, right? They died before the age of 10. And she said the most powerful thing to me, I say it was like she was speaking to me, but it was in that moment I had my aha, you will be fine. Is this woman lost 3 children, and she said the most profound thing, those who lose the most do the most. And I said, if she can lose 3 children, and survive and raise millions of dollars and make a difference in this world, then so can I. And I thought that was pretty profound. Those who lose the most do the most. And I think that's,
Isn't that what we're talking about?
And that's what we're talking about. Well, I'm so grateful that you came and shared your story. And I'm so glad that we met under these circumstances. I know that Heather wanted to connect us and she was wanting to do so. But I'm glad it happened like this because this is how it was meant to be. And after this, I definitely see myself at Heartworks, and we'll take it from there.
Awesome.